Third time is a charm. I am not recording this anymore, but welcome everyone and thank you for being here. I am Erica Beach, a licensed clinician and a professional astrologer, and today we're talking about a transit I feel we should all be paying attention to, and that is Mars conjunct the fixed star Aldebaran, which is coming up on July 12th. Now, in this video, we will have an overview of this transit of Mars conjunct the fixed star Aldebaran. I will also be going over a few of the basics of the fixed star Aldebaran, what placements and signs will feel it the most, how to work and integrate this energy, what to expect. I will also be going over one chart example so you can see how this looks in the public eye. And lastly, why we should be paying extra attention to this transit. So make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, and let's get started. Coming up, we have the transit of Mars conjunct the fixed star Aldebaran coming up on July 12th at 10 degrees and 9 minutes in the sign of Gemini. Now, you'll begin to feel this transit from July 8th through July 17th as Mars makes its 3-degree engagement aspect right before and after the conjunction. So from the time Mars enters the 3-degree engagement, which is 7 degrees Gemini, all the way to 13 degrees of Gemini, is when you'll feel this transit the most, mostly applying. So if you have any personal planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury through Saturn, 7 degrees to 13 degrees of Gemini, you will feel these effects of this transit the most. You will also feel this if you are a Gemini rising, or if Gemini is your perfection house, being that Mercury is your time lord. You will also feel this because this is happening as your time in the sign of your perfection house. You will also feel this if your perfection house is Aries or Scorpio, because that means Mars is your time lord, meaning Mars, you will feel this more because Mars is the one that is making the planet or the aspect to the star. And finally, also if you're a mutable rising, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces, you will also feel this strongly because this is hitting one of your 4 angles in your birth chart: the 1st house, the 4th house, the 7th, or the 10th house. And so remember that we will all experience this transit very differently depending on what is indicated in our chart and if we have any planets aspecting this transit. And so we have to always take into consideration the entire chart. Now, let me know if you have any of these placements in the comments below, because you should probably already be feeling some of the effects of this energy. And normally we can feel the transits most intensely as they are, again, applying to the aspects. So make sure you drop in the comments below, and I would love to hear if you have any placements around here. Now, one thing to know about the fixed stars is that they live beyond the celestial hemisphere, which in a horoscope, they function at a different level than the planets. And that's because they are fixed and unmovable, and they transmit their qualities to any planet that is conjunct them or through their planetary nature, which is why I want to talk about this later on and why it's important that we pay extra attention to this particular transit. As we know, the fixed star Aldebaran is one of the 4 royal fixed stars of Persia, and the royal fixed stars bring leadership, authority, and visibility, but also they teach you how to handle power, recognition, and your influence. These stars, they do promise success, but only through their own energy and if the person follows the test the star brings. And so this is true for all 4 royal stars, and they each have their own specific nemesis or test where they act as turning points or pivotal life events. And they all guarantee success to some extent, but also a downfall. With the fixed star Aldebaran, the test becomes integrity, a moral or ethical dilemma where honor and values are at the forefront, and they tend to determine whether the rise is sustained or lost. And Aldebaran's major turning point is often around ethics rather than achievements. But also, like I mentioned, the fixed stars can also come through by the planetary nature of the star, and that comes from Ptolemy's foundational work, where one or more planets define the temperament of the star. And like in this case with this transit, and why we are talking about today is because Ptolemy said that Aldebaran is of the nature of Mars. And so when Mars, the planet, is the one activating the fixed star, we know we need to pay particular attention and something we need to just be more cautious of. And so again, Aldebaran is through Ptolemy's foundational work. This is being activated. And so now that we know that the fixed star Aldebaran is about integrity and our values being put over our success, I do want to just go over some of the very basics of this fixed star, Aldebaran. And so we know that Aldebaran is one of the four royal fixed stars of Persia that is known as the Watcher of the East. And it sits at 10 degrees and 9 minutes in the sign of Gemini, in the constellation of the Bull in Taurus. And this star sits at the bottom of the eye of the bull. And according to Vivian Robson's book, Aldebaran is a pale rose star marking the bull's south or left eye. Its name is from its Arabic name Aldebaran, the follower, because it appears to follow the Pleiades across the night sky. It formed one of the royal stars of the Watchers of the Heavens among the Persians in about 300 BC, when, as the Watcher of the East, it marked the vernal equinox, the other stars being Regulus, Antares, and Fomalhaut. It gives honor, intelligence, eloquence, integrity, popularity, courage, ferocity, a responsible position, public honors, and gain of power and wealth through others. The constellation, again, it sits in the brilliant red eye of the celestial bull. Its ecliptic position we went over. And the myth we know is the Persian myth of Mithras, the slayer of the cosmic bull. It was a great military god who rewarded his followers if they followed the strict rules of worship to him, also known as the Lord of Contracts, and considered all exchanges as sacred, and also oversaw the business of his followers, requiring honesty and purity. And we know again, Claudius Ptolemy gave this the planetary nature of Mars, and this being a 1 magnitude star. And really quickly, the storyline again that we've gone over of this star is arising through merit, defending what is just, acting with courage rather than aggression, speaking truth despite consequences, earning respect instead of demanding it. Yet every opportunity comes with an ethical test. And so some of the psychological themes that we can see is that these themes can often appear when people discover they cannot separate their achievement from their character. So this is when the star asks you for moral courage, leadership through integrity, standing up for your principles. This can also be a noble type of ambition, protecting others, speaking truth, a strategic action, and confidence that is rooted in values and integrity. Now, when it comes to the nemesis or the shadow, this is where honor loss becomes fortune loss. Success gained through arrogance, dishonesty, or abuse of power eventually will lead to a downfall. The shadow is forgetting why you were given influence in the first place. And really quickly, a mythic archetype associated with Aldebaran is that of the noble warrior who acts courageously while remaining guided by a principle. It could also be of the ethical hero who must, repeatedly choose their integrity and their values over their ambition or their success. The deepest gift of Aldebaran is not recognition, but becoming someone whose actions consistently reflect their principles and their values. Leadership becomes the act of service rather than the self promotion. Now, we know the planet Mars represents strength, action, the will to push forward, and the desire to conquer it, but it also represents that perseverance and the energy you need to overcome obstacles, but also the enjoyment of risk. Mars is risk, and it can show us and show you the ability on how you take on conflicts and how you fight, also how you express aggression and how you handle the process of anger. And in some other basic terms, Mars we know is severance, it's war, it's conflict, it's Aries, it's passion and the willpower. And Mars wants to movement. It dislikes waiting. It wants action results. It wants momentum and resolution. But now we are putting Mars in the temple of Mercury, Gemini. And Mars in Gemini is the archetype of the critic. Mars is in the air, double bodied or mutable sign, that is quick, sharp, and skillful. And all their aims are always suited and aimed towards goals and ideas. But the host Mercury is currently retrograde in the watery sign of Cancer, where Mercury tends to express itself through emotion and memory and protection. So this slows down Mars in Gemini, which is a good thing. He tends to be speedy. And there we have Mars, it's slowing it, or Mercury is slowing it down, bringing him inward into the mind and mixing emotion and feeling into the process. So now let's add Mars with Aldebaran. Bernadette Brady states that Mars with Aldebaran is the successful craftsperson to gain success through decisive action, to appreciate physical talent, and to understand that clear, focused action produces one's best results. It's a person portrayed to be a noble soldier. So when you put Mars and Aldebaran together, this may look like a crossroads or a defining moment where choices that change your direction or your moral or ethical ethics are tested. Now, working with this energy can be a little tricky. Psychologically, people often experience pressure in moments when the desired outcome feels justified. So these are times when we're saying to ourselves, I'll apologize later. Everyone bends the rules. This is for the greater good. Or if I don't act now, somebody else will. And so Mars amplifies that tension. And because of that, it narrows our focus towards immediate goals. This is also about not taking any shortcuts, no temporary victories, that can look like and often depend on manipulation, intimidation, half truths, cutting ethical corners, or, protecting the ego. So watch out for these during this time. Mars naturally values victory, and Aldebaran values honor. And that might mean channeling this energy into, maybe it could be having an overdue conversation that may have been difficult, maybe advocating for a cause, or creating something that reflects your deepest values and your character. And so I have only one chart to share with you. I do have other charts, but I do want to share the one chart where I immediately thought, okay, who could have an ethical issue, something very similar to Aldebaran? And of course, I thought Scooter Braun, which is Taylor Swift's old manager. But one thing to take note is that using astrology to conclude that a specific placement cause a person's actions is not accurate, right? But this is ultimately more useful to explore how the symbolism of the star is reflected in their lives, especially in their public narrative. But we're going to look at the chart again of Scooter Braun. And the chart of Scooter Braun I find super fascinating when it comes to the topic of Aldebaran. And when I first thought about this fixed star, I immediately thought about Scooter Braun. And I'm like, I bet you anything he has a placement or a planet on Aldebaran. And lo and behold, he does. And as a Swiftie, of course, I was going to discover all of this. And so he has Mars at 9 degrees Gemini in Aldebaran. And so here you have a very traditional story with Scooter Braun and Taylor Swift of integrity, ethics, and betrayal between two people. And if you don't know, Scooter Braun used to be Taylor Swift's manager on her record label, and he was offered to purchase her masters, her music behind her back, and essentially looking like he stole them. Very Mars in Gemini. But if you're a Taylor Swift fan, you already know this, but you know that this was the catalyst that began her re-recordings and Taylor's version. Anyways, Mars on Aldebaran usually has little hesitation to act. It can be impulsive, and these individuals may be called to lead, compete, negotiate, and protect something that they value. They often have a strong sense that they must seize the opportunity before someone else does. So Mars on Aldebaran is one of the classic signatures of someone who possesses that tremendous drive, that competitive instinct, and the ability to pursue ambitious goals. But remember that attached to this, there's a condition to the success, is that it has to be sustained through integrity. And so by him purchasing these behind her back, really just, it never offered her the opportunity to purchase them herself, is that classic of betrayal in ethics with Aldebaran. Mercury in Cancer tends to think through memory, logic, emotions and feelings, and nostalgia, and personal relationships rather than detach meaning, logic. And so its retrograde condition can process things a little bit more, be reflective and more private and internally oriented. So this can be a tendency to revisit decisions, negotiate behind the scenes, or rely heavily on trusted networks. And we know here he went behind the scenes and he trusted the other guy, I can't think of his name, of who he purchased the records from. Now, if you look at this symbolically at the public controversy surrounding the purchase of Taylor Swift's Masters recordings, you can definitely question of whether this was legally allowed versus, what was ethical, what was honorable. So there's that question, right? Can professional success come at the expense of trust? And here we know that Scooter Braun ended up having his downfall, and he has not been able to keep up with the success that he used to have. And I wouldn't even want to say keep up. He doesn't have that success. And one can agree to disagree about his business decisions and, whatever the public discussion was on this. But, this ultimately comes down to ethics and loyalty and the relationship. This was about a contract. Remember, Aldebaran is the star of contracts via its myth of Mithras. And that is very much keeping up with the symbolic dialogue that we have here between Mars, decisive action, and Aldebaran, honor, reputation, and integrity. And also Mercury in Cancer, personal bonds, history, and emotional context. One could also frame this psychologically as someone whose instinct is to move decisively in business, or while communication and decision-making are filtered through existing loyalties and long-term relationship dynamics. But at the same time, we have a situation that after his purchase of Taylor's Masters, it caused a domino effect in his downfall with his reputation, with many artists leaving the record label, as well as the loss of his success. And someone who proclaimed to be loyal to Taylor and to be her friend, denied and betrayed her behind her back. And at the end, Taylor ended up purchasing her masters back last year on May 30th. And the sun was at 9 degrees Gemini and Mercury was at 10 degrees Gemini, conjunct Aldebaran. So I thought this was kind of cool that she bought her master's back around the same time when this star was while this star was speaking. Can't even talk anymore. Now, across the collective, we may see various things, and I think we're going to see a lot of it in sports and in politics, most of all, but also in business and entertainment and social media. But it's going to express itself as rapid success or someone growing confidence or an increased certainty or an ethical compromise or public exposure or loss of trust of some sort. And so this can come across different scenarios and doesn't have to be one specific type of event, but we already are seeing some of these things, especially in sports during the FIFA World Cup. But like I mentioned, this isn't a specific event, or it can be, but rather this also can be a turning point for us or a hurdle to cross if it's affecting our charts. But this could be corporate fraud, this could be plagiarism, this could be financial misconduct, doping scandals, or even abuses of power. And so these aren't usually one single thing. It's usually a pattern of things that have happened where the integrity then comes and becomes exposed. So again, Mars symbolizes decisive action, and Aldebaran brings something up to test if that action remains aligned with the principle. It's going to ask you if you are aligned with your values. So look at where you have Gemini in your chart and look to see if you have any placements between the mutable signs Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces between 7 degrees and 13 degrees. And look to see if you have, again, any placements in your chart that are aspecting these degrees. And there you can break down how your chart will deliver when it interacts with this transit of Mars conjunct Aldebaran. One way to take action or to work with this energy of Mars conjunct Aldebaran is to look at this transit in a 3-step theme, if you want to look at it. And one of the ways that you can look at it is the eye. We know that it is the southern eye, and we know also it could be like a third eye. And so if you ask yourself in the theme of the eye, you could be like, what am I supposed to notice in the situation that I'm asked to, make a decisive action on my integrity or my character? What do I have to discern, or what am I witnessing that doesn't align with me? The other part to look at is the guardian. We know that Aldebaran is the protector, right? So what values or what people or what ideas are you called to protect? What part of your integrity is more important to protect? And lastly, we know that Aldebaran in Arabic is Aldebaran and is known as the follower. And so you can look at this as your guiding principle or that North Star. Again, it's that part of your values that's aligned with you, what you choose to follow in life. And again, with this transit, there are some things to take into consideration and with caution. Mercury is retrograde, the host of Mars. And so he's really helping us to slow down. And, we need to consider with this transit are, the pressure to take any moral shortcuts. Mars wants movement, and Mars often shows up physically before it becomes conscious to us. It dislikes waiting. It wants action, results, momentum, and resolution. It's a lasting legacy versus that temporary victory. Mars naturally values victory, and Aldebaran values honor. Those aren't always the same thing. Mars on Aldebaran wants you to become a protector rather than that conqueror. Boundaries that protect our vision without sacrificing our values and being out of alignment. Boundaries aren't walls, they are commitments to how you will conduct yourself. Mars symbolizes decisive action, and Aldebaran is about whether your action remains aligned with your principles. Aldebaran always wants you to be thinking of whether your success really reflects your real internal character while remaining honorable when you possess that power. And also, something very important to remember is that transits to Aldebaran and your natal placements teach you how to handle power and recognition and your influence with integrity. And as Mars activates this royal star, you may think it's pushing you towards something urgent or something immediate. But what the star is really doing, it's moving you with greater integrity. The best victories, they always come when they are achieved without abandoning your values, and that they remind you why you started whatever journey in the first place. So thank you again for joining me today. I hope you found this useful, and I hope that you can join me in the next one. Until next time, bye.